soon as, I guess as soon as I'm ready. And I'm going to hand that off to Jennifer. And we're going to start with the pledge. Sean will be right back. And it's the way we always start our meetings. And the public portion, and Brad will lead us since he's an Eagle Scout.
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome everybody. We've been in exec session, and this is a really low chair, which I don't like at all. And so how are we doing? What else? Brad, I think we have a variety of
we have a variety of
modifications.
Agenda. So, going to add a appeal to the board as district business number 6, I believe it is. Jennifer, if we go all the way down to K, school district business, we're going to add number 6. That's going to be an appeal. And I understand that's being resolution's being walked in for us.
And that's not already on the consent agenda?
It is not on the agenda. It was on the exec session agenda. It was not on the public agenda. I'm going to ask to add the tentative agreement between the district and the Employees Association. It's dated 1/22/18. I'm going to ask to add that resolution allowing the superintendent to execute that. We're going to add that to the consent agenda. So I guess that's going to be Jennifer, I guess you would put that on as E5.
It is written on the personnel report. Is it changed from what was on the personnel report?
Didn't see it there, no.
I didn't see it there.
It was the, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but in the administrative instructional, or I'm sorry, the employee, Pat's, I think she had a paragraph on the first part of that.
I'm looking.
Yes, it is.
It is, all right, so we don't need to make a change. I still don't see it. Where is it? Who's?
The 4th personnel report for the employee
Service staff.
Service staff.
Okay.
Apologize for that.
Sean's got it. I see it.
Yeah, we'll just be clear about that in the future if that's the way we're going to do it or not.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. So that's there. We don't need to make that change. And then, if I can get back to the agenda. On the administrative and instructional list, we're going to delete Roman numeral number 9. And those will not be included tonight. So it'll go from 8 to 10 with no Roman 9 any longer. Those are the changes.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah.
All over it.
Trying.
With a variety of moving parts, and I guess they're moved in the right places now. Jennifer, I don't see a list for public comment.
There was no one signed up.
Wow, really? We're this only last week. Last meeting.
Someone does want to speak?
Well, yeah, obviously, this is public comment period, so I guess we will start the public comment period. For those students in the room, we're as a board, we met in exec session, we came back, we're now in public session. We as a board have the option to provide opportunities for the public to speak to us. It's not something that we have to do as a board. It's something that we typically try to do. We look forward to as much input from the community as we can. Typically that so we leave the space for half an hour for public comment in our meetings. Over the past few years, we've really gotten to the point where there hasn't been all that much, but lately there's been more. So we always want to give folks the opportunity to speak. You don't have to sign up. You can ask for time, but it typically is 30 minutes, 3 minutes per person, and we try to hold to that. And there are rules of the game. We probably didn't make that as clear, a little out of practice, I think, but basically you can come and say anything you want about any subject. Your experiences as a community member, as a student, as anyone else. I sometimes pick on seniors when they come for their government class to say a few words. I get a few out of the jocks in the room once in a while when I pick on them. But obviously it's an opportunity to speak. What we can't do is talk about individuals. You may think Jason Trumbull is the best principal in the world, which we know he is, but you can't say that because that obviously that leads to others that may not think Jason Trumbull is the best principal in the world. So we don't get into the personnel items at all. That is not something we talk about publicly. That is something that we do in private, and that is not done in the public forum. So, well, just to make that clear. And but since there's a bunch of people in the room, I thought we might as well get that out. We do try to keep it at 2-3 minutes. Typically, it's when we have a lot of folks coming to speak. If folks don't want to go over, you're really not disrespecting us, you're disrespecting other people that want to speak within that time frame. So just wanted to get that out. We are being televised, and we just want to get that out so everybody knows. Folks have gotten way used to us really just allowing pretty much open-ended, extended comments, and we do have rules that we will pull off from time to time if we have a lot of folks who want to speak. Tonight, looks like we have one person who would like to speak, and if she's still here, she can speak now. And you always state who you are and go for it.
My name's Dion Hersini. I was here at the musical meeting, let's call it, and I came in knowing a little bit about what was going on, but pretty unaware to a great extent. And I had spoken to an individual who was very concerned about what was going on with the musical, and we both had a meeting of the mind, so I decided to come down because she couldn't. So I sat through, as you all did, that meeting and was quite overwhelmed by it. And my daughter is in 7th grade at Boynton. It's her first semester. She's spent all of this time at Montessori school. So when I left, I was doing a lot of processing. I was doing a lot of reaching out in the community, talking to other parents, trying to get a handle on what I saw happen. And I wanted to bring up to the board because I've been doing a lot of nonstop talking, and in all honesty, it's all anybody's really talking about too. Even if it is, a lot of it is under the radar and in email, because there's a lot of parents who are not like being loud about what they think, let's say. And I wanted to bring up almost everyone I talked to, just so you kind of know a little bit what I've been doing. I've had people who agree with the casting, disagree with the casting, maybe a little bit 50-50, or a lot of people are kind of going, we see an issue that has been brought up, but no one likes the manner in which it was brought up, if I can say that. So everybody that I've talked to is concerned about the process. And so there's a lot to unpack, because again, reasonable people, what I figured out, reasonable people could disagree about the casting issue. And it didn't necessarily have to be like a oh my God, how can you say that? Well, you know, it's kind of like, well, I kind of think this and I see this point, and then other people are going, oh, I kind of see this point. So reasonable people could see it differently. And that's the thing that has everyone so freaked out, is because it's kind of being put out in the community that reasonable people couldn't see it differently in a way. And a lot of people who feel otherwise than what's being projected publicly are not interested in stating what they think publicly because of the energy and the manner that the discussion is taking place and how it's taking place. No one wants to step in it. I've heard that a lot. Nobody wants to step in it. So I just wanted the board to be aware, because I think that a lot of what's happening now is very one-sided. And again, not to say that there isn't an issue to be looked at, it's the manner in which the issue was being addressed and looked at. And
My eternal clock is saying we're getting close.
Okay,
So-
okay. I just want to say that, so I'm an attorney. I have a background in alternative dispute resolution and mediation. And I can see so many opportunities for this to have happened differently. And my daughter, when she was at Montessori school, they had a peace curriculum where they taught the children how to have differences and come together and hear one person out and then the other person, find common ground, put yourself in the shoes, and stuff like that, little kids. So I want to bring all of that up because all of those are great ideas, and lots of people have a lot of great ideas that seem more kind, like a kinder process than what kind of has gone down. So I wanted to bring that up to you guys to explore.
And I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
So no one else has signed up?
I just have a question.
It does not mean, right, and you can ask, folks can ask questions. We have no, this is not a question and answer forum. You can ask the question, but it may just hang there.
It's
So,
just actually about the schedule. So I was at the policy meeting last week regarding the religious exemption issue, and for some reason I thought that I heard that you were following up with that tonight, and now I'm feeling like perhaps that was inaccurate. I'm just wondering, is that
Those
on the
policies
agenda?
are on the agenda for this evening,
They are?
for first reading.
Thank you. That's all.
anyone else? Students that are sitting there with your pens? No, nothing. So we'll, no one else will move on. So you probably were hoping for more excitement, but we do have an agenda to get to. So I think a high student reps to the board, it's up to you.
Okay, so for some major events, the Area All-State Music Concert took place this Saturday at Culp Auditorium. And Area All-State is essentially where all the students who have received the best NISBA scores in the area and the county come together to practice with their music and perform at a concert.
So this past Saturday, the 10th, at Winter Formal was held at the Museum of the Earth. And personally, for me, out of all of the dances that I've been to at high school, it was probably the best. The venue was great, and the senior class officers just did a really great job at organizing the event.
And Science Olympiad had a competition this past weekend at Maine Endwell, and they placed fourth, and they did very well overall, but they just slightly missed the state cup.
This past Saturday, Green Team had a competition in New Haven, Connecticut. Overall, they placed 5th. And then 2 Fridays ago, Wind Crew hosted their blood drive, and overall, 53 people, both a combination of students and teachers, donated blood.
And at Ithaca High School, students have been discussing the possibility of bringing back the official school mascot, the skunk, or potentially changing the mascot. And a survey has been circulating by Captain's Council asking students about what they think about the mascot and this issue overall. Okay, and for some sports updates for swimming, boys have sectional prelims tonight. I think they're going on right now, or they just finished. And they have section finals on Saturday, and if they win on Saturday, they will have a undefeated season. And ski team sectionals just finished yesterday, and 2 members qualified for state.
So recently, the boys hockey team, boys varsity hockey team, won their last game against Baldwinsville, and then they will be having a game on Saturday, February 24th, at the Portland rink against Monroe Woodbury. And then also in recent news, the Coaches vs. Cancer basketball game happened, and there was a raffle at the game where half of the profits went to a cancer society.
Well, that's it. That's great. But the basketball team did beat Elmira last night to the West, and they'll be in a playoff game tomorrow night, I believe. Correct? Not sure I know all these things, Dr. Brown, but they're going to play down at Main End, I think, for those who want to make the drive. The skunk was a mascot when I was at Ithaca High. We did really, really well with the skunk as a mascot, so I'm all for it. If you, well, asking me.
That was 1870 what, Rob?
I want to speak about the skunk.
And I will tell Sean that I'm still bigger than he is. Moira, the skunk.
The skunk, well, I don't know when the skunk went by the wayside, but when I was at Ithaca High School, and I'm trying to think, it was probably around 98.
Teaching.
Teaching, yes, teaching. One of my students in the WISE program, his project was to do a history of Ithaca High School. And in that process, he discovered that the skunk had been the mascot. So then the real thrust of his project was to bring back the skunk as the mascot. So for that year, the skunk was front and center. And then I don't know why the skunk went by the wayside again.
I just want to say they keep getting rid of the skunk for a reason.
No, we all should be a wahoo. What the heck are
Number one, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Right.
I knew we'd have to bring it up.
And board responses, Brad, please.
Last Friday, Myra and I were able to participate in Mad City Money at the high school. Second time I've been able to do it. Unfortunately, you were all way too smart for me to upsell you stuff. I tried, but I wasn't able to upsell very well. We were supposed to make them blow their budget. It was our objective.
I only sold one boat.
Yeah, they were all too smart about it. I think I sold one expensive vacation and that was it. So didn't do too well, but the students did quite well, thanks to Alternatives Credit Union and Cornell Cooperative Extension for that program, and of course to Jason and his team for making an afternoon available for the program. It's a good program.
It was a great scene.
Yep.
Able to walk through. And go ahead.
So also got a chance to see the Code Red open house, TSA, and there was some very, very good exhibits there. So I really enjoyed that.
Anything else as we roll through? Are we good? Sean?
I have the privilege this Thursday of participating in Boynton Middle School's Black History Month celebration. It's one of my favorite events of the year, and so hopefully other folks will be there, or we'll learn more about some more Black history as the month goes on.
Thanks, Sean. We're good. We will move on. Consent agenda is before you.
I'll move the consent as presented with the couple of changes we made to it.
Second by Chris. Variety of items there. Anything to speak to that has not been spoken to?
I don't think so.
Okay. Move seconded, and without any other questions, all in favor? That is everyone, and we are 8 tonight. And if I'm not mistaken, that's I don't have a sticky, but Dr. Brown, are we ready for you?
I hope so.
There you
Thank
are.
you for the opportunity.
Dr. Brown, you're at the bottom of my.
You haven't found that in 8 years. I don't know about that. I'm waiting for you to find me on that agenda.
Well, it all runs together, Dr. Brown, and if you don't make yourself known, then.
It's nice to see all the young people in the room tonight. We may be the only board meeting happening on Tuesday night this time in New York State for the state champion in the room. State champions right there, everybody. If you didn't know, right there. Solid things coming out, and everyone else is coming out. It's pretty cool. We probably doesn't like us embarrassing him so much, but we do. Just to highlight a couple of items of our educators in the news. I'm passing around an article. It's entitled All for One and One for All. Our own Mary Grover and Jennifer Gondek, who works at TSU BOCES, are published authors. And this is an outstanding article that's been written by our colleagues as we are leading our state in our efforts to be more inclusive and how to change our practices around co-teaching, planning, scheduling, and differentiation in classroom settings. So we all know that amazing work is happening at Carolina, and Mary Grover is highlighting it in this article. So I'll share one digitally with you also. We'll post it on our website. I don't think we've posted it yet, but I think everyone should be reading this one. And another, I know Sean won't like me saying this, but the centerfold for the recent Onboard magazine, sent out to over 700 plus school districts in our state that speaks to the School Boards Association's work over the months, features our own Sean Everly Bradwell, as he was the keynote speaker at Diversity and Inclusion Symposium in Saratoga Springs, he and his wife, as they opened up their conference and have sparked some conversations in our state and in our country around how to have communities that are more inclusive and that are also fostering diversity. We will have a state opportunity or a conference here this summer, July 30th and 31st, where we expect over half of the school districts in New York State being here in Ithaca, bringing teams of folks, school board members, principals, building level leaders, school board members, teachers, and community members to put together action plans about how to be more diverse and more inclusive in their school community. So a first of its kind opportunity, a partnership, unlike any other, a partnership with NISBA, NISCUS, the Superintendent's Association, SANES, the Building Principals and Administrators Association, and hopefully NICET, the Teachers Association, all of us working together to address this conversation, spark this conversation around diversity and inclusion. And again, sparked by our own Sean Everly Bradwell and his wife speaking at that event. So just want to highlight some local educators in state and national news. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks, Dr. Brown. Who's paying for this conference here?
It's NISCUS and SANES, so it's not us. We're hosting.
I was giving you an opportunity to make that clear.
Yeah, which is going to be beautiful to have this kind of a partnership.
But it's going to be an outstanding opportunity. So, all right. Thanks, Dr. Brown.
Yeah, thank you.
And we will move on to really the meat of the program and our agenda and reports, as we have done, from some of our building leaders in the district. And I'm seeing Brad Pollock in Cuga Heights.
Rob, you just said that Jason was your favorite or best principal.
No, it was just an example.
I'm a little hurt.
No, he said high school. He said high school.
Right.
Okay. And I
So
also feel like
right.
shouting out to Silas, there's some Lansing soccer guys, and they were state champs, so I wanted to say.
Right, Brad. That's why you never get into this favorite or that favorite.
Yes, right.
Right. So.
My kids tell me that all the time. Yeah. So I'm happy to be here. You know, last time I came, the parking lot was full, and I was thinking, wow, all these people are here to hear about my school. But anyway,
we're happy you came back a couple of weeks later, Brad.
Thank
so
you.
Appreciate it.
So I will be brief. If you feel like I'm going on too long, you can give me the wrap up. But I do have things I want to talk about. I'm extremely proud of our school, and there are a few things I want to highlight about our school. First of all, when Dr. Brown said, why school? The simple answer for me is school is the only thing. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. As you know, that Cuga Heights is a very diverse community, and we bring some of the wealthiest and some of the poorest kids, and kids that look black and brown and white and yellow and everybody in between, and we come together and we try and figure out how we can get along as a community while also trying to get some life skills and become productive citizens. So I want to highlight some things that are going on in terms of teaching and learning innovation, and then cultural responsive practices, and then inclusion. So I'll just give you a quick synopsis of some of the case study work that's going on. In first grade, they're working on a garden. We've had a garden at Cuga Heights since forever, but the garden has been resurrected, and it's quite large now. And part of the case study was asking kids what were they curious about. Well, it turned out that they planted cabbage and something had been eating the cabbage. So there was a controversy about what was eating the cabbage and how could we find out. So we borrowed a trail camera, and the big reveal was, I know it's more suspenseful than this, but the big reveal was that it wasn't an animal, it was a person that was coming into the garden and eating the cabbage. Which led to an interesting conversation about how can we feed hungry people in our community. In second grade, their case study is about community as well, about going from me to we, and they visit places within the greater community. Places like Loaves and Fishes in the Friendship Center, talk about the difference between wants and needs. And the celebration at the end of the year is a community dinner, which is always quite popular. In fourth grade, the case study that I find really intriguing is that if you live in Cayuga Heights or you're familiar with drive through Cayuga Heights, there's a problem with the deer population. So their case study was called Oh Deer, and how do we live with deer, whether friend or foe. So we had a variety of perspectives on the deer population, had the former mayor come, someone from DEC, a person who has Lyme disease, and then when we did our Project 4 Hangar Theater presentation, it was about varying perspectives on deer. My own agenda was, so what was the conclusion? But there was no conclusion. It was that there's multiple perspectives on the deer, which is probably a good thing to say if you live in the village, so that you don't get run out of town if you say the wrong thing. Third grade, they were working on countries, culture, and crumpets, and how where you live impacts how you live. Storytelling night launches into the country study, and in a couple of minutes I'll tell you a quick story about storytelling night that I found quite touching. In fifth grade, we're talking about enhancing our outside learning spaces, specifically to address things like behavioral and emotional issues, talk about soft skills like cooperative learning and mindfulness, and how being outside can actually make you healthier socially and emotionally. And we're talking about, because there is a little area out back that we can use for a mindfulness trail, that's one of the things that the fifth graders are working on. And finally, in kindergarten, they're talking about how can they be a positive contributing member of their community. Part of that means how to be a good friend. One of the most touching things that I saw was a little iPad video presentation of kids talking about, showing a picture of what they were doing and saying things like, I can be a good friend by helping my friend when he's hurt. And I know it sounds simple, but just watching it was very, made me feel a little emotional. Verklempt, as my relatives would say. And the other part about that I got a really big kick out of is that part of the kindergarten case study was how to be a responsible person. So the kids have bags that they call responsibility bags, and that's where their supplies are. But they're also talking about hallway responsibility, and what I was struck by is recently, kids were out there with clipboards and pencils and looking at the behavior of other students walking through the hallway and just doing a little chart about what they notice in terms of the noise level and whether kids are walking quietly or in a straight line or what they're touching. And what I found interesting is I actually think that our kindergarten friends can inform the rest of the school about whether or not we're doing the things we're supposed to be doing in school. So rather than having older kids be the role model, in this particular case, I think that some of our younger kids can be the role model for what we expect from people's behavior in our school. So I said a minute ago that we talked about mentioned storytelling night. So for storytelling night, an example of some cultural responsive practice is that we just had a student come to our school from China. She'd been in the school for about 2 weeks, did not speak English. We have an ENL program, and thank you for that. So, up until now, when we've had students that don't speak English, they've had to go to BJM. And even though they live in Cayuga Heights, we've had to send them to another school. So having kids that can stay in our school with our own ENL teacher is a very powerful and important practice, and I appreciate the board and Dr. Brown's support in that endeavor. So for storytelling night, the girl that came from China didn't speak English at all. So the ENL teacher found a short story that she could recite in Chinese. Fortunately, one of our veteran fourth grade storytellers speaks Chinese and English, and I asked her if she would interpret the story. So my fourth grader came with the third grader, and then the third grader told line by line, and then the fourth grader was able to translate in English. Again, something simple, but it was pretty powerful, and allowed someone that just came here, was only here for 2 weeks, to participate in that experience. And Another piece of storytelling night that I found pretty profound is that one of our students was extremely shy and he did not want to tell his story in public, but his teacher convinced him to allow the teacher to videotape the student telling the story, to tape it, to record it, so that at storytelling night, even though the child did not tell his story, everyone in the audience and his classmates watched him tell the story, and I thought that was just a pretty good way to have him participate when he chose not to or he was not willing to. So I think that having kids from different cultures and speaking different languages that don't know English at all has been a powerful experience for our school community. I find myself often scrambling to find someone when someone comes into the school, and I'll get on the phone and say, do you know anyone that speaks Portuguese? Or do you know anyone that speaks, that can speak Persian? And that's been an interesting experience to have those kids really feel like they're part of our community. And then the last thing I want to talk about is inclusion. So like other schools, we've done book studies on inclusion, which I think are important, but they're not sufficient in themselves. And what we've evolved to is rather than just do a book study, we do case studies where we're talking about students and about what our experiences are. And in most schools, the kids that present the most challenges are kids that have behavioral challenges. And looking at the perspective of kids with behavioral challenges and in terms of what they lack and what we need to teach them is a little bit different than saying it's somebody's fault. It's really about what can we do to make sure that they feel included, that they're part of our school. And then the last piece of enhancing our co-teaching model refers to the fact that somewhere along January, Dr. Brown heard my plea, which was we could really use some additional support for struggling students in reading and math, and we now have another instructor for that as well. So the enhancement of the co-teaching model is simply that we have another person who's available to us. He's a young man that comes from Niagara University or Nazareth University, and he's been really helpful to us, and I really appreciate that. I told Dr. Brown it wasn't even my birthday, but I appreciate that gift. So that's my quick summary. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Questions for Brad?
How many kids do you have in the ENL program this year?
Well, it's fluctuated because we've actually had some students that have come in and that either their parents are affiliated with Cornell or some kind of global business, so they've been there for a couple of months. So that now we have about 6 children. 5 of that didn't speak English at all.
So are your case studies pretty much the whole year, or you're doing?
Well, it depends on the specific case study. So the garden, for example, that's a full year case study. Some of the case studies are like that ODR was probably like a 4-week case study.
So the garden's a full year? What do you do in the winter with the garden?
Maybe you're going to ask that. I asked them that question as well. So part of the thing that they're doing in the winter is looking at seed catalogs and talking about what it is that they will be planting in the spring, and having the kids actually do the ordering. And then one of the first grade teachers told me that she wants to do a professional development training so that we have other adults in the building that can take kids out to the garden, even whether they're in first grade or any grade, and say, rather than just taking a walk outside, come to the garden because we'll put you to work in the garden by weeding, fertilizing. Whatever.
So the case study with the garden, are they using that as a jumping off point for which kinds of things, for reading,
one of the
writing?
first grade teachers is also the farm to table coordinator, so that really does kind of lend itself to some year-round work. And then the garden itself is probably doubled in size. Oh, and something else I wanted to mention is that we've also done a couple of other things to our campus, such as we now have a frog pond for a 3rd grade case study that you saw when you.
Right, that's right, yeah.
Make use of those areas that don't drain very well, Brett, that's great.
It's got a little extra water there.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything else? Sean, go ahead.
2 questions. One, I'd be curious, it's great to hear about these programs taking place in student learning. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk to us about, for lack of a better word, your biggest challenge.
Well, sure. I think the biggest challenge is I often describe our school as a tale of two cities because of the kids that live in the neighborhood and the kids that get bused from West Village. So trying to engage more of those parents and families more often in our school has been the biggest challenge since I arrived 6 years ago. You know, I think we've been pretty creative about how we go about trying to engage folks, by having parent conferences at the West Village Community Room, by holding evening events at LACS, by providing transportation. Our PTA has been generous about any time that we want a parent to come for a meeting, or a parent wants to come for a meeting, or there's an evening event, our PTA will pay cab fare for folks to come, so that transportation won't be a barrier for those folks coming in.
Great, thank you. And second, pulling a little bit from my own experience at Ithaca College, seeing a pretty significant increase in students who need resources in terms of support, be it trying to deal with anxiety, whatever it may be. And so you'd mentioned some additional resources and how they've been helpful in other areas. Is that an area that, I realize it's elementary school, but I keep hearing stories about elementary school students who may need some additional supports as well. Has that been your experience as a principal there?
In the mental health realm?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, you know, as you might know, I'm a former school psychologist, so I'm specifically, particularly sensitive to that issue.
Absolutely.
And I would say that, you know, not just locally, but statewide and nationally, people refer to that as a mental health crisis. So, yeah, I would say that there's certainly a need for folks to be well-trained and to provide enough support to kids that have mental health needs.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I have two questions. The first question is, how would you say your teachers or staff dealt with the issue of talking about homelessness and poverty with the students, especially thinking about the age range? And the second question is following up of your response of, a tale of two cities. What ways in which are your teachers and staff trying to create one city instead of two cities in terms of having parent-teacher conferences at West Village and Summit Pineyuka Heights?
Right. Well, I feel like the one city is our school itself. That's our community. Most of the case studies are about our school community, and we do a lot of talking about our own school community. But do you remember what the first question was? Because I just went out of my head, and there was the first thing that you said I wanted to respond to.
The first question was
homelessness and poverty.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that it's a touchy issue because we clearly have kids that are hungry. So talking about homelessness and poverty with kids that live in poverty is a sensitive issue. Third grade, for example, part of, it's not a case study, it's just something that they've been doing for the last, since I've been there, is making lunches on a regular basis and then bringing it down to the Friendship Center. So I think that there's clearly an awareness that there are people in our school and in our community that have food insecurity. But being able to talk about that in a way without making a student feel uncomfortable about his or her situation is a very delicate situation. It takes a lot of tact, and I think that we try and be tactful about that. Just like we have the PTA sponsors a food pantry so that we give kids snacks when they, healthy snacks, yogurt, cheese sticks, or whatever, granola bars to take home with them to go on the bus, but we do that in a way that we don't call attention to it, but we try and fit our friends. Does that answer your...
Anything else? E, go ahead.
Just probably the same question, a slightly different way. There's no way that the kids coming from one side of the tracks can't distinguish that although the school might be their community, they're certainly passing through foreign territory. Does the school have any role or take any opportunity, or is it even possible to help the kids navigate that distinction, for lack of a better term? I mean, in both ways.
Well, what I find interesting is that I see kids that live closer to the school inviting some of their friends over to their homes from West Village, to their homes in Peg Heights, which I think is an eye-opening experience. I don't see a lot of kids that live in the neighborhood going to West Village for play dates. So, and then look, here's the reality, and I'm not saying anything to you folks that you don't know. I've been to West Village many times. It does not feel particularly safe for me to go to West Village, and I know that there are students there and families there that don't feel safe in that community as well. And I don't know what the responsibility that the district has, the board has, I have personally. I just know that it doesn't feel like a particularly safe place to be, even though I've been there on a number of occasions to either transport students, sometimes to bring holiday gift baskets. But so I understand the question, but I don't know if I have a good answer for that.
Well, the interesting thing about what you're saying is that gets to the heart of who we decided to be as a society, right? The very land West Village sits on was allocated specifically because people in another place didn't want to deal with those people, right? So to now be in a position where we listen to our media and we listen and feel as adults that it has become the thing that was feared initially, feels like a double penalty. And we're beginning to criminalize poverty, just like every other place in this country. So it's,
I'm sorry, I was going to say, I do feel that what we do as a school is make sure that the kids that come in our door, wherever they come from, feel like it's their school, that they're welcome there. And I suppose you'd have to ask kids themselves whether or not they feel that that's the case. But I know that our mission is to make sure that everybody that walks through the door feels like this is our school.
And I get that. I'm just pushing back on the I don't feel safe thing. That's a story I heard in the 70s, a story somebody else heard in the 80s, somebody else heard in the 90s, and people say it now. It's a game, man. It's a magic trick. Don't fall for it.
What part that it's not actually that kids will say that they don't feel safe there, or what's I'm not sure what's
that the entire facility, which houses 600 families, represents an unsafe space.
Right. Yeah. I don't mean that if I've gone to someone's home that I'm not welcome there. I don't mean that. I'm saying that. Yeah, I think that the it's a high crime ridden space. It is.
I think we have to be.
You concentrate anybody in that. Right. Concentrate anyone, Brad, in that concentration.
Yep.
With the economic conditions that those people are facing, and the same things will represent. Right. There is also a tremendous community there. There's also a tremendous level of cooperative association that everybody in this community could learn from. I certainly don't feel unsafe when I go there. So, it's a moment to question who we actually are and what we respond, because it winds up on the front page of the journal.
Well, I know that there are times when we've talked about trying to have a function outside at West Village, have a picnic, and the management has not allowed, just hours said, no, you can't do it. We won't allow you to have that kind of celebration. I also know that there's something that's in neighborhoods that's called a book box. You probably have seen it. There's one in Fall Creek. I've seen it in other places as well. We've had a simple request that we just wanted to put a book box at West Village, so, a free lending library. And I don't know if you ever talked to the management about that as well, but they've not responded to a request to just let us put the book box there on, just so we can make sure that our friends can take the books that they want to.
Those are two things I think that we can try to work on. The only thing I want to say is that, again, I mentioned my place of business at the college. If you take a look at that police log versus other police logs, it's also a high crime area. But we don't feel nearly as unsafe going there as well. So I understand.
Well, I don't spend a lot of time at the IC campus.
Or Cornell campus. You name it, right? That there's a lot of high crime places when you have pockets of populations that are stacked up on top of each other. So I think that's what he was trying to get at. If I'm not mistaken.
And as a building leader, it's critical that the kids they feel what you emanate, right? Because you are an extremely personable person, right? You're not distant, right? So I challenge every adult in this room to check those assumptions, check those stereotypes, and recognize that you have a tremendous amount to learn from populations that are different from.
I would just end with saying that we should be cognizant of the language that we use. So in terms of using the word safe, like what does safe mean to you? What does it mean to me? And as a building leader saying, I personally don't feel safe walking into this area because of the area. What kind of energy does that give about the people that come from that area? So if being in that place makes you feel safe, what energy does that give off about the kids that are coming from that space in terms of the kids that are interacting with kids from this space?
Sure.
Chris, go.
I just need to take it one step further and remember that we're speaking to a community, a group of people, telling them that their location isn't safe. And as an individual who grew up in a large city that was crime-ridden, that was classified as unsafe, I felt safe and comfortable there. And the feeling of safety is actually when I left that place and went to areas that were unfamiliar to me with people who weren't familiar, didn't have similar backgrounds, customs, or history. So really, that's where the safety is. Crime is not also indicative of safety, and we just need to really be conscious and careful in how we are depicting this to the greater school population, because we're really we're walking a fine line here. So really, I want to end this conversation, but we need to walk this back a little bit, because I'm really uncomfortable where we went.
I think, Brad, anything else you'd like to say?
I think I've said enough.
So, Brad, I'll give you a chance to answer a different question. You had an ask of Dr. Brown this past year. We're going to talk about the budget in about 5 minutes. Do you have an ask? You talked about challenges. We talked about a variety of challenges. Is there something that Cuba Heights needs? What's the ask for
this
Cuba?
This goes back to what Sean asked about mental health issues. I think that I've worked in other school districts where each school, aside from having a social worker and a psychologist, has also had a school counselor. And I'm just thinking that this is not a request specific to my school. I'm just saying that having a school counseling program, so that you have a designated school counselor in each school, is something that I would urge the board to think about. And I realize that we did not have that conversation ahead of time, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning that.
No, that's why we put you on the spot and ask if you have an ask. Brad, thanks. This has been it's very good conversation, and that's why we like to have our building leaders come in and opportunity for us to have a talk. That's great. So thank you, Brad. Thank you for you coming back on another day. We appreciate that. And Amanda, we're going to talk about a very large budget that we put together.
I figured that since budget was on the agenda, that's why all the students came tonight. Super excited.
Well, Amanda, but this is
important.
You can't be a student here unless there's a budget.
That's correct.
So this is pretty important.
So Jen's going to pull up here just a few slides because it's preliminary this evening. For those of you that don't know, you'll get used to me meeting after meeting. This is the time, it always is the time for budget, but this is the time that we're talking about budget development for the next year, for the 18-19 school year. We're living currently in the 17-18 budget. Every May, these get voted on. By April, the board will have a budget that they feel confident in that will go to the public, we'll educate the public about, and we'll move that forward to a vote in May 15th. And we always keep that little date going on all the slides. So today, it's pretty simple. We have pretty much 2 items. And Jen, we could probably skip to just right here. I'm just going to go quickly through, and I know a lot of folks here on the board and the exec team talk a lot about the executive budget proposal. For those of you that don't know, a lot of the school district's decisions sort of are working sort of in timing with the governor's proposals and with the executive budgets that come out from New York State. And so there are certain decisions that we'll have to make as that information rolls out to us. So right now, a lot of this is preliminary. You're going to see some things that say draft on it. That is very normal. It's not that we were not doing work. It's just that this work is timed with other factors. Okay. We're also going to talk a little bit about the revenue projections. By probably the end of February, beginning of March, we're going to have a really tight idea of our tax cap. I've pretty much done, I think, 99% of the work, but we always want to make sure we have all of our pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes, which is sort of an agreement that businesses make to be able to sort of pay less than what their taxable value is with the Tompkins County IDA. And so we need to make sure those are all set. We need to make sure that our building aid is set. So there's a large formula that goes into that. So a lot of these things, just know that these are a little bit moving targets. Some are kind of tighter targets, others are larger targets depending on the factors that come our way. So we'll go to the next slide, Jen. Thanks so much. So I just did a simple executive budget overview. And so we did this a little bit last year as well. Some of these factors have changed as things have come up or sort of gone away from the conversation. And I wanted to just give some updates and then some new information as well. So this column here represents a lot of the either school boards associations views or the school business officials associations views. They're advocating for school districts always that sometimes matches what the governor's proposal is. Remember, the governor's budget covers much more than school districts. So this column here will show a real true focus on sort of the benefit and impact on students and school districts. So you're often going to see a lot more favorable conditions for us in Ithaca City School District in this column. Here would be the executive budget proposal, and so that again is out of the governor's office. And then I tried to get a little bit more specific about what this means for ICSD right now at this point in time based on the executive budget proposal. Because yes, these are very strong advocating agencies, but remember that we're competing, school districts are competing with lots of other entities in New York State to get funding, okay? So, foundation aid is one of those formula aids. We haven't changed our formula in a long time. We're a rather medium-high wealth district according to the formula. You can see here that a lot of associations want to give us billions of dollars over 3 years. The executive budget proposal, $338 million. That's quite a lot of zeros and difference, right? And so for us, it means a whopping, if we kept with the executive budget proposal right now with no changes, we would get an additional $43,000. We may not spend that all in one place, because it's, or we just actually might not even be able to fund what we want.
And recognize that that's done with our wealth index declining. The governor's budget calculates our wealth index is actually declining, I think, from 122 to 119. And that our poverty rate is actually increasing. They're projecting us to be at 42%. I think we're running about 37 or 38 free and reduced price lunch. So in spite of those two that would argue for more aid, we get a rounding error.
Yeah, we are not considered high need. We're not even considered medium need, average need. We are a very low need district in all the factors.
The theory is foundation aid is based on a wealth index that has already supposedly balanced, factored in high need, low need, medium need, such that if you add 2% to it, everyone gets 2%, would be the theory. Because you'd still get, in our case, 14% of our budget and foundation aid, roughly. But instead, because the governor's not putting as much money into the budget, he's actually forced to skew it toward the highest needs, so that those of us who are in the middle need get nothing, and those in the highest need also get nothing. That's the way they've changed it. So when somebody talks to you about foundation aid and the foundation aid formula, be aware that the governor ignores it. There's a fancy formula, but it's being ignored. Sorry, man.
No, please, it's fine.
Just want to make sure.
Anytime I can give information that evokes dialogue, I mean, that's pretty exciting.
Let me just add, Amanda, let me just add to that those of us on the board who travel to see our local representatives in the Assembly and the Senate and make trips to Albany, we keep saying to them, direct So at what point do you look at us differently? Right now we have 3 schools in which free and reduced lunch are over 50%. Some heading towards 70. Will it be 4 schools? Will it be 5 schools?
Yeah.
When exactly do you actually consider that although we look extremely wealthy on paper because of our tax base, our children who are coming into the district are continuing to change? And we get silent, slightly weird stares.
Right. Yeah. Because they won't look building specific, right? They'll look district overall.
District-wide.
And they look at data oftentimes that's old, right? It's outdated. I know. So foundation aids, as I said, and we've explained, is sort of a formula-based aid. Then there are other aids that come back to the districts that are based on essentially what you spend. The more you spend, the more you get back, right? So if you spend $1, you might get 50 cents back from the state to reimburse you for those costs. So there's, right here, there's expense-based aid and also BOCES aid. Those are different types of expense-based aids. BOCES obviously is all the services that we utilize through BOCES, our TST, our OCM BOCES, whether it's technology, trash removal, it could be the summer school work that we do, right? PD, we run through them, itinerant teachers. Expense-based aids in this row here are the things like transportation aid. We get money back the more we use our buses and the way that we utilize our buses, and also building aid. The more that we build, we'll get money back every time that we expend capital, okay? So in both of these rows, there's conversation, if you look here in the executive budget proposal, of capping that aid. So we've done a really good job. We try, our philosophy is that there's a way to do it where you can get money back on your dollar. So you're not spending $1 and really spending $1. If you can spend $1 and get 50 cents back, we've been trying to utilize a lot of these expense-based aids, right? Because it makes sense. That's smart. So we've been channeling a lot of things to BOCES. We've been trying to be creative around our transportation and our real, conscious use of our capital reserves and our capital outlays to make sure that our buildings, get attention. If we went by these association proposals, there would be no cap. We would just continue to get that money back as we spend it. And so they're looking forward in 1920, not so much in 1819, but they're looking for 1920 to actually have a cap from year to year. So in the past 4 years, I just want to talk about BOCES. We've increased our BOCES aid a total. And so if you've averaged it out over 4 years, it came up to a 1.52. But in 1 year, actually, when we made a lot of transitions for technology, especially in the way we did leases and the way that we purchased a lot of our equipment, we had much higher than a 2% average increase in that year. So we would have lost aid in that year. They would have held it back from us when, in fact, we were following the rules and doing smart by the taxpayer, right, to be able to get that aid back. Same thing with expense-based aids. There are many times when we'll have capital projects. We're doing capital project planning right now. I guarantee you we're going to increase that capital budget by more than 2% with building aid from 1 year to the next. They would withhold that money from us.
Well, they might.
Yeah,
It might. It's a proposal. This is a
They
proposal.
might, and each is slightly different.
Yeah.
I mean, the BOCES one is difficult because let's say we and 3 other districts in our BOCES decide there's a new program, BOCES is the best place to house it, and 40 of our students sign up for it. And
Right.
40 students from adjacent districts sign up for it. 80 kids are going to go to it, and that drives BOCES budget up 4 or 5% because we've got a new program. It's serving children, but now we're going to be capped at 2%. So guess what? That means we're all going to think twice about starting that new program. So I think that's problematic in that regard. The building aid one is just utterly insane. 2% statewide. It isn't 2% for our school district. It's 2% statewide. Well, I have no way to control what the other 699 school districts do in a given year via building aid. I mean, building aid, like for us, is going down this year because our debt service is going down. We're paying off debt. Makes sense, right? Don't need as much. It's not as expensive. But then at a point, we're going to borrow more money to do other improvements to our schools, and we're going to have a big jump. declines over a number of years, then it takes a big jump back
And
up.
if others time up their debt service at that same time,
Anywhere
because they're doing
similar to
capital
ours
projects, we'll have
will be
restrictions.
limited. That one's just crazy. And the transportation aid, that one's difficult. For smaller districts more, we can control ours better. But what we can't control is the fact that fuel costs are rising right now.
That and consolidation as
Yeah.
well, consolidation factors,
Yeah.
and now you have to do more miles, and now you're
Yeah.
increasing, because there's a lot of push for people to get additional funds if you consolidate. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors out there, and again, remember, this is a moment in time study, these
This
are
is
the
the
proposals
proposal.
at this time.
And we've
Yeah.
expressed our displeasure.
And I can't believe Brad said Albany is insane, but go ahead.
I'll say that we'll be taking this issue up in the Legislative Advocacy
That's right.
Committee. Something NISBA's worried about it. It came up in the meeting that we went to last week.
Yeah.
And also BOCES, we've been talking to Superintendent BOCES about it too. I mean, it's these are crazy ideas. So anyway, we'll be working on it. Stay tuned on that end.
So
Right.
we've established a level of insanity, so Amanda, you're going to keep going.
I'm going to just do two quickly, the two other rows here, very simply. As you heard from Brad, I mean, we've really expanded ELL programming at all of our buildings to try to have a community-based program in the building that you are districted to. And there really is, unless you're a community school, which we are not, you don't get any aid or any additional benefit for that. And then finally, the property tax cap. This has sort of gone kind of unmentioned, although BOCES is wanting to do a capital project as well. BOCES has no money of their own. They get their money from the school districts. The way that we get money is to levy taxes or get state aid. This is another way that sort of the state has kind of put like parameters on us, and so that we're going to have to levy taxes with no sort of benefits around that money to help, fund just another campus where our kids go. So we look at BOCES as an extension of the walls of Ithaca City School District because we have a number of students that go there. Okay? So, next budget. Yeah.
Just follow up on that as well. That's also going to be on the agenda for the legislative advocacy because that's an issue that has been.
Well, it passed the
Worked on.
legislature last year, both the Assembly and the Senate, and the governor vetoed it. The law has been rewritten to, in theory, answer all of the governor's questions and is been re-proposed. I think he'll just veto it again and with another set of reasons. Because the tax cap law is perfect as written. And that's basically the governor's argument. It's perfect as written and you cannot possibly change it.
So, conversation of the tax cap leads to this slide. As I said already, we have about, 25% of our budget revenue. So revenue drives expenditures. If you don't have the money to spend, we can't spend it in the school district. So it either comes from state aid, it comes from our tax base, or it comes from savings accounts, reserves, fund balance. The next time I come before you, I'll be doing an overview of the fund balance pieces and talking a little bit about how we're projecting that we're going to close the year. Can we sustain the same sort of fund balance that we put to balance the budget in years past? I kept that line flat because that's, again, one of those moving targets. I kept the other revenues, so other revenues are like rebates. So for example, if we thought we were going to utilize BOCES services, but we didn't, we get that money back in a rebate. We get monies for rentals of CULP and our buses. We get monies from Medicare, they come back to us. That's all sort of in this line. I kept that flat as well because we're doing some revenue projections right now, and so I'll come to you with a better, tighter number. Yeah.
And that also, if I'm not mistaken, that also includes some very limited federal money.
So
Or is that outside of our budget currently?
So the other revenue, the federal monies are the title monies.
Yeah, title.
That's actually not something that the public would vote on. That's not in our general
That's
fund.
not general fund money.
Gotcha.
But it definitely supports our operations, and if there are changes to those federal dollars that are coming our way, we will have to absorb those expenses in the general fund. So it's not like we're going to go out and rent a ton more buses, right, to make that up. We're talking a couple $100,000 if those changes are made. Right now, Lydia and I work on that, and Lydia manages those budgets. We haven't seen any definite changes yet. So we're gonna just keep moving forward as if those federal funds in the title grants are gonna come our way.
Yeah, the congressional budget, the House, the president's budget has no Title II money. It zeroes out.
So,
Sorry.
right, no, I know, it's just bad news, I just had to take a breath,
Yeah,
because,
yeah,
you know,
sorry.
this is the glamorous work of school.
And maybe you might remind you what Title II money goes to.
Oh, Title II is for, we use it for professional development.
Yeah.
And we had it was cut
We
in
already
half
got
for
it.
this school year.
Yes.
And I'm expecting it to go to zero.
Yeah, Liddy does wonders in her budget with what she has.
Right.
It's pretty
But zero's
She
really.
has-
Can't do wonders with zero.
Zero's kind of.
Even Liddy can't do wonders
Even
with zero.
Liddy, even Liddy. You know? Right,
I mean,
so
that's incredible, isn't it?
I wanna mention a little bit, state aid, we went through this review on the last slide. I said that the foundation aid went up about $43,000. We increased our expense aids. We are using more BOCES. We're getting a little bit more money back in transportation. I want to tighten that number up, but right now this is my projection for the state aid amount. So you can see again, $363,000 increase, give or take, once I try to solidify those numbers. The property tax cap, that is driven by a formula. Again, another formula, you plug in your factors, and it's many times known as the 2% tax cap. The 2% tax cap is sort of a misnomer because the factors, when you plug those into the formula, sometimes you get below 2%, sometimes you get above 2%, sometimes you actually go negative in this formula. So we're very fortunate because we do building work, because we have a healthy and vibrant, growing community in terms of our tax base. All those factors get put into the formula. Last year when we calculated our property tax cap, we went right up to the cap, and this is again where we would go right up to the cap. And one more time, I just want to double check all those numbers, make sure we're set. Sometimes these move a couple $10,000 once we get just sort of more solidification in terms of our building aid. That's another factor. But I'm pretty confident in this property tax cap number. And so this would be most likely very close to the cap that we would be able to go to for getting our taxes. Now this represents the levy. What you see on your tax bill is the rate. The rate for Ithaca City School District has actually gone down the past 2 years because we have a much larger tax base to tax. There's a lot of building, there's a lot of growth, so that enters into sort of the tax base and everybody's share sort of gets smaller because there's more to tax. This is the levy amount. That goes up because that's the amount of taxes per the formula that we are allowed to bring in to be able to balance our budget. Now, if districts want to go above the tax cap, you must get at least a 60% vote. It's called a supermajority. That's very risky for districts to do, even in Ithaca where we really believe in education and education's our business. So this property tax cap number is very important for us in terms of decision making. Next slide, Jen, thanks. This is the last one. I just wanted to put a few factors, sort of what we know and the way that I'm going to drive expenditures. And it's not just me. These are based, obviously, as you can see, in things that are oftentimes beyond our control, or they're bargained. So we know that all of our bargained agreements are pretty much settled. There's one contract that we're going to be going to the table around, and that's our teaching aides and teaching assistants. We're actually going to be meeting with them very soon. Their contract is up at the end of the year. So we know right now with our settled bargain agreements, and we sort of anticipated, what we might need. We're thinking it's going to come in around $2.3 million. So a lot of this funding came from changes in health insurance. We actually utilized savings in health insurance by going to cheaper premium plans, less expensive premiums, so that you pay more as you go versus up front, and we've converted that over to salary dollars. So when I present to you the expenditures, you're going to probably see a little bit of either steady or limited growth in health insurance, but you'll see the salary lines going up because we've sort of transferred that money over to sustain the salary growth. special ed, we always want to build a contingency. Sometimes that's a little bit difficult to anticipate, mainly because you can't anticipate how many high-needs students and families that come into our district, but you want to make sure you build enough budget in there. If they need a nurse, if they need a PT, OT, speech, right, you want to make sure that we have monies there. BOCES, they're anticipating about a 3% increase from one year to the next. Their costs go up, just like ours do. They have bargain agreements. Our debt service, that's how we pay on our debt, our bonds that we've taken in to be able to pay for refurbishments or construction of the building, and we're going to see a slight decrease from one year to the next. So those are the factors that right now, obviously, we all know. We've sort of all talked about them in the past. You're going to see those in real numbers, you know, as my presentations move on through budget development season. So that's the sort of factors as of February 13th. Exciting, I told you, right? It's super fun.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
On the debt service side, just so people can thank their congressman, the new tax law did away with one of our options for saving money. When rates are low, you can do what's called an advance refunding on bonds. We've done it in the past a number of times, but Congress decided that we don't need to do that anymore. That we shouldn't have the option to save money. So you can thank your congressman for doing away with that one.
I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, no advance refunding.
That takes commissions away from the bond dealers and all
I
that.
know.
But it's fees are a good thing sometimes. But so Amanda, what's the next time we'll see you? We'll be talking about.
You're going to see me more than you probably want, Rob. My apologies
It's
in advance.
well, no, Amanda. We always love seeing you. In this day and age, we like seeing you. But eventually, we're going to find out what we're going to spend $126 million on.
That's right. Right. So, just right now, we've rolled the budget forward. That means you take all the items, you move it forward to the current year. We'll make sure that they're all proper and that we didn't miss anything. If there's any growth, new positions, we make sure that's okay. Jen posts all this stuff to the website, so oftentimes we field questions from, now till the next presentation. As I said, the next big key factors are we want to make sure that whatever we decide to put into the budget to balance it from our savings account is something we can sustain, and that we're not dipping into the savings so much that we're going to cause harm to us in years to come, and then the expenses. And so we'll look at the gap between the expenses and the revenue. We do a lot of work between that time and prioritization and looking at how that we can make those numbers match.
It'll be a fun February break.
It's a great February break. I love it.
This is what we do next.
And
March break too. It's awesome.
right, we try to point out to the community all the time that I guess I point it out all the time. I have no idea how many English teachers there should be at the high school, or what Brad Pollock needs at Cuya Heights as an example. So we really look to the budget makers, the building leaders,
That's right.
to if we got into that detail, that would not be a good use of our time, and not frankly, we'd never get a budget done.
Okay.
So building leaders are working on what they need and their budget essentially all year long. It's part of the year-round budgeting.
Absolutely.
And so these numbers are not a surprise, but they're working, they're fashioning their last asks, and this is what I need to run this building,
We
or
actually-
department, or whatever. Right.
Correct. We've looked at sort of their supplies, equipment, and now we're moving on to staffing. And so we're setting up meetings with them right now. We do a lot of face-to-face meetings, unlike sort of the way it used to be done where there were spreadsheets sent out and fill this in. And
Right.
so we try to really up the communication around the planning pieces.
Can we get a summary from some of our students? Can we ask them to reflect on everything they just learned?
I'm not going to ask them because I really want them to
Perhaps at the end of the meeting.
I used to work with students. I want to remember those days and get smiles.
That was a great way to pick up the attention level.
There's a
I
quiz.
saved you all. I just saved you all.
Nobody said there was a quiz.
We could ask them one thing.
Not even me. I believe now. Thank you all for coming and listening. No pressure for me.
There was suddenly a lot of movement in the crowd.
Amanda's here all week.
I'm here all week. Sometimes.
Thank you, Amanda, as always,
Yeah.
and we do appreciate the process that we go through all year long to get to that May 15th date, so we're not scrambling at the end. So, Dr. Brown, we're going to move on, and we're talking athletic mergers again with
I'll move the merger for spring sports with the Elizabeth Ann Clune Montessori School as presented.
Second.
Thanks. Are we talking all sports, some sports?
Girls track.
Haven't we seen this one
No,
before?
No, we do it once per year, once per season.
Has to be a season.
Okay, it looks really familiar.
Thinking about 7th and 8th grade, modified boys
Right.
track, girls track, boys lacrosse, girls softball, boys baseball, 1 to 3 students each.
And you see there in quotations, no one will be displaced.
I think I missed, but it's as per normal, and, oh, there we go. Thanks, Sean. Obviously, that if you can run, and track and field's great, and all the others. But, all right, move seconded. Do we have any other questions that we typically have, but we've been asked and answered in the past? We're all good? All in favor? That's everyone. So I will sign. And Sean, while I'm signing, we're going to start talking about policies, I believe.
Yeah, we have 4 policies on the agenda for this evening from the policy committee. The first is policy 5110.2. This is open enrollment guidelines for the year 2005-2006. We thought it'd be a good idea that we delete that from our policy book since we're past that decade and moving from there. So at this time, I move policy 5110.2 for deletion.
Second.
This is a first reading, so we could have as much conversation as we want to have now and or our next board meeting as well. This is our attempt to try to clean up our policy book and get rid of policies that shouldn't be there. Sure.
Do you have a policy to replace it with?
We already have an open enrollment policy. So there's already a 5110.1, which is the actual open enrollment policy that we will be discussing after we have completion of the demography study that the board has undertaken, and we have a little bit more information. We may take a look at that when that time comes. This is simply trying to get rid of a policy that does not have any impact on the work that we do, and has not had any impact on the work that we've done for 12 years now.
Is there any reason why we have to bring it back for a second reading, or can we just move it?
It's our policy.
Right, our protocol, we could have put it for a second reading tonight with a supermajority vote. We did not decide to do that, so my apologies. It is on the agenda for a first reading.
Can't we do the supermajority vote now?
We didn't change the agenda. If we'd have to.
I asked the person who moved it if he'd be willing to modify it to a second reading.
Yes, that is a friendly amendment.
Just I'm asking if you're willing.
Yes, I'm willing to move this to a second reading
Seconder.
and for deletion tonight.
No, we have to vote on this.
That has to be super. No, now you can, now just have it.
Can we just?
We've changed it to a second reading, now it has to be a supermajority of those here.
To get rid of a policy that is out of date and we never use. Okay, that's a tough vote.
Okay.
It's a tough vote.
But no, I don't want to influence
Ask the
anyone.
students about this process.
Exactly.
We're a large, ponderous organization.
Move seconded for a second reading. All in favor?
Looks like
That's
a
everyone?
majority to me.
Can we strike it then?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you very much. It's very
Never to
helpful.
be spoken of again.
We have additional policies that will be coming your way that will also be up for deletion, particularly as we move some things around and come up with different policies as well. The next 3 policies, I feel, just give a little bit of background. We discussed these policies in connection to each other. I will move them individually, but it's 5420, student health services, 5421, communicable diseases, and 5422, our school immunization policy. We spent 2 policy meetings, in addition to multiple phone conversations, community meetings, talking to our medical personnel, both our current and former school physician, folks in the community, to have some dialogue around these policies. And we are not done, but we are sort of working our way towards that end. And so the first policy I'll move for a first reading tonight, 5420, student health services.
Second.
And this was a policy to take a look at what are we doing in-house in terms of what are the health services that we're providing for students as they are in our district. Relatively short policy. This is a policy that was last voted on by the board in 2011. We made some simple word changes, language changes, both by the advice of our school physician and dialogue with our district legal counsel and pretty significant community, for the people who are present, some significant community input as well.
Any items of note that were changed? It is what it is.
Yes, I should have brought those changes in. My apologies.
No, that's fine. Pretty straightforward, though.
Yeah.
Questions, et cetera. It's been moved, seconded for the first reading. We good, Sean?
For me,
All in favor on the first? That is everyone.
And I'll make sure I put up an addition that clearly marks whatever changes were for our second reading at our next board meeting. In fact, it may not even be our next board meeting because we won't be able to have a policy meeting before then, so it'll be at our next board meeting in March for following all this.
No, it's just, it's always good to have the contact.
Fantastic. Policy 5421, communicable diseases, was a policy that we also went through. Similar process, trying to have some conversations, changing some language to keep with current legal language as we could. This was also last voted on in 2011, and so what we presented here is a first reading of policy 5421. So I move 5421 for a first reading this evening.
Second.
Second by Moore.
What was the changes from 2011? Was it significant?
No, simply a word here and a word there, and things like contagious or infectious. It was things like that as opposed to just contagious.
Okay.
Trying to be a little bit more expansive in what we're doing. But again, I will also bring those changes, those direct changes as well.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All in favor? That's everyone.
Policy 5422 was the policy that had the most changes, and it had changes in two different ways. One change is policy 5422 also had with it a previous protocol. Actually, it was a regulation. It was 5422-R. That is not a regulation that we have been employing as a district. We will have a conversation about the current immunization protocol that we had a conversation about as a board previously in terms of what we've been doing different this year. That will be brought back up in the policy meeting in March, and then will probably make its way to the board. It may not make its way to the board for a vote, but it will make its way to the board for conversation and figure out what to do next, if that makes sense. Part of the reason why we've been trying to, in the policy committee, have debates about whether or not we should include regulations or procedures, given that they change in far greater regularity than the actual policies do, and trying to figure out what is the appropriate response to do that so we're not out of compliance with our own policies. With that being said, 5422, the immunization policy, went through, I don't want to say it went through significant changes, but it went through a number of word changes as well. So, for example, one of the things that...
there was a lot of discussion about the changes.
Right, there definitely were. One example would be that on bullet point number 2, our old policy used to require a notarized statement of written exemption from a parent. That was not required by law, and so, for example, that was stricken, that you do not need things that are notarized. We tried as much as possible to go back to the state statute. This is the policy that many in the board believe we should not be in the business of granting exemptions or being the people who determine who gets exemptions, who does not get exemptions. But we're trying our best to follow New York State law as much as possible and New York State regulation. And so a good portion of the wording was lifted almost verbatim from state regs. Other things were far more I don't want to say contentious, but at least conversational. I know a couple of board members attended one of those board policy meetings, so you were present for some of that conversation. And what we came here with was the policy, but not the procedure, right? And so what we're moving at this point in time is policy 5422, the school immunization policy, for a first reading, which means it will then go back to the policy committee and then back to the board meeting before it becomes official. But my apologies, I moved this policy for a first reading.
Second.
Second by Moore.
You've got a couple of items at the bottom of it referenced. Are you intending to put them in as footnotes?
Some, yes. Some I Some no. The sample request for religious exemptions, we will have a conversation about.
I'm at the NICEP guidelines, the medical and religious exemptions for DOH.
Those.
We sometimes put those references on as footnotes.
Absolutely. Those two in particular we thought would be a really good idea because they come from state reg and it wasn't us saying what should happen. It's coming from the New York State Department of Health and the New York State Department of Education guidelines for immunizations for 2014. Our last vote on this policy was 2008, and so things have changed somewhat dramatically since over that time period. Yes, and the public health law as well. We will also be including as a footnote, as a reference point.
Can you remind us of the next meeting we're going to take another pass at this?
March 3rd, March 4th. When's the next? March 6th.
6.
And then it'll be on a board meeting after that at that point in time.
The regulation meeting.
All three of these policies will go through.
This is the first meeting. This is the first reading. Yeah. All right.
And at any point in time, board members, please feel free to write, give suggestions. Community folks, these policies are posted. Please feel free to write, give suggestions. We can have conversation. But that's the process moving forward. Policy committee on March 6th. Board meeting after that, which I imagine will be the 13th.
All right. Is it your understanding as the person leading us in this that at this point we're probably talking about a limited number of additional changes to this policy before we actually then get to the process and the procedure?
It is my understanding that unless we have feedback from anyone on the board, that this is the policy as written that we will be deciding at the next committee meeting and the next board meeting, and that most likely the conversation for us will be both in terms of the content of the protocol and whether or not the board wants the protocol to be voted on as part of a policy, or if we want it to reside someplace else. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a few lines here that are interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we have a great deal of time with someone with a PhD in Romance languages, a 35-year or 30-year veteran of English, 35-year veteran of English, and another person who just likes language. We spend a good deal of time talking about whether it should be either or other, or things of that nature. Right? Do we want the Harvard comma? That's right.
Oh, and I'm upset I missed that session. I mean, that's, well,
I got excited a week ago
Did you get that one?
about an appeals court case that
hinges
changed
on
down
the
the Oxford
comma. And we've had debates about the Oxford comma at our policy meetings on a regular basis.
Oh, come on. No, really.
Yeah, really.
Well,
And you think budget is exciting.
And I just knew she'd enjoy that.
That's great. That's great. Go ahead.
One other question.
no, you're making the Oxford comma thing up, right? No, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's real. I just wonder if we could, because some people came here who were at that meeting, who came just to talk about or hear us talk about this, I would just wonder if it would be okay to ask if anybody in the audience has any questions about what we just did and what all this means, because we're speaking in, this is a foreign tongue.
Yeah.
So I can't expect you guys to understand what the hell we just did. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty confused. What just happened?
We haven't done anything, frankly.
I have a quick question.
So,
Have any of the members of the board read or looked at these revisions before this first reading, and have all of you done it?
There's a big question between whether or not folks have read this or if we can compare the two documents as well, right? And so the question becomes, this is what we're voting on, and so people oftentimes read what's being voted on. What we just did was pass this for a first reading, which says that this part of the process continues forward.
Did we pass it?
No, we did not vote on it yet. Thank you very much.
Nothing has happened yet.
Nothing's happened yet. If this passes a first reading, it would then be put on the next policy committee agenda to review and have dialogue one more time. If it makes it out of that policy committee, it would then be put on another board meeting for the March 13th to be voted on for a second reading and adoption at that time. So each policies go through multiple conversations to figure out whether or not we want to actually put our name and vote on this to become part of official ICSD policy. So any official action at the earliest it would take place would be on March 13th, but the next step in the process will be March 6th at the policy committee to have further conversation about this.
And that's where we typically spend a fair amount of time digging down into one issue at that work session and a policy like this. And we don't typically do that here when we're not all on the policy committee that deals with a work session. So we look for those Oxford comma work being done by others, and then the rest of the board has an opportunity to sit in and hear what everyone has to say and have their 2 cents once we get essentially a first draft of what a policy may look like as we work through the policy book or do a standalone policy. So it's part of the process, part of how we divvy up the work on the board.
And one last big change that I should note is in the previous policy, it had an asterisk that was identified under the possibility of exemptions. We decided that asterisk did not make sense and moved the whole paragraph into the policy. So it's no longer a footnote, but now officially part of the policy as well. Similar language or similar idea, but the notion is that it's now not a standalone thing that you get to find someplace on another page at the bottom of the page. We thought it needed to be front and center in the policy as well.
So as I recall, I'm trying to say this in plain English again, we added language that made it clear we're not trying to be arbiters of faith. That did not get us out of the extremely complex area where folks wanted to discuss the difference between faith and philosophy and or what that nexus, did we ban that word?
We didn't
what
use
that
that
connection would be between one's professed faith and your decision to not vaccinate. So that's why I asked the earlier question. It doesn't seem like we're going to resolve those in this policy. We're going to have to do that with our procedures and our process.
That is correct.
One quick question.
So I was trying to read as fast as I could and couldn't even really see the whole, that's not just this one, but as I'm sitting here kind of interested in your whole process, we rarely actually have time or get to see the entire thing. Is that?
That's what policy committee's for. We do all that in policy committee. These are also posted on our website as part of the agenda. So if you go to the agenda, you will see verbatim each policy written as part of the full agenda.
Okay.
And anything else at this time? We'll take a vote.
I just wanted to, between now and the policy meeting, I just wanted to frame this a little bit in terms of inclusion, because the rates that we have now in certain schools have effectively created like exclusive spaces where children who are immune vulnerable really cannot afford to enroll. So I just want to like frame this in terms of the larger issue of inclusion in the school district.
I appreciate that. And I'm sure we'll get to that again at the work session and keep talking about this, developing the policy and the rules and regs. Because we, as you know, as we all know, we are governed by the state of New York, and we are notified by the New York State Health Department on a variety of issues, one of which is immunizations in this district. So let's keep working. Anything else on this right now? Obviously, this is not done yet. So move seconded for that first reading so we can do some more work on the 6th, correct? Mm-hmm. All right. All in favor? We'll move it to the second work session.
Thank you all. More to follow.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Policy Committee. Been a lot of meetings regarding this at policy and other venues as well. Brad, I get you guys mixed up all the time. So that's a Nicole thing. So I'm sorry.
He's the guy with the blue tie.
So exactly. So that's joke Nicole and I have a little bit. But Brad, you moved. We're doing a student appeal now.
Yes.
But the other item was already voted on.
Yeah, that was part of the consent.
All right. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Now it's a student residency appeal. I'll move that we reject the appeal.
Second.
Second by Maura. Any real discussion there? Probably not at this point, correct? So.
And I hope Jennifer has a
So you want me to change it to, instead of uphold the decision, change it to reject the appeal?
I didn't have a resolution.
Okay.
There wasn't one in the agenda, so whichever way you want to do it. Do you have one now with?
Yeah, there is one in there. It says, motion to uphold students' residency decision of January 25th, 2018.
What doesn't update while we sit here?
I don't know.
So you're saying you've got it on board docs
And it
now.
was provided to me
Hang
prior
on.
to the meeting.
Well,
I apologize. You want me to read the resolution?
I'm just looking to see if it'll update while I'm sitting here. I've not usually had luck.
Can you go ahead and read it?
I will. So the motion was motion to uphold students' residency decision of January 25th, 2018. The resolution is, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Ithaca City School District upholds in all respects a decision with respect to students' residency issued by the District Administration Officer on January 25th, 2018 for students with ID number 71001263 and ID 7100022414. Be it further resolved that the board hereby directs the district clerk to provide notice to the parent regarding the decision herein and to further notify the parent of their right to appeal the herein decision to the Commissioner of Education in accordance with Section 310 of the New York Education Law.
What she said. I'll move that.
I'll second that.
What did I hear? I heard uphold.
Uphold the decision.
Uphold
It's
the decision of the hearing officer.
Support the decision.
I'm sorry, it wasn't in.
Okay. All right, so that made sense to everybody, I guess?
Yes.
All right. And I know what the hearing officer, okay, I think I've got it now.
The hearing officer rejected it.
You're right, thank you, just to make that clear. All righty then. That's been moved, seconded by Maura, correct? If I heard that earlier, or that's the actual resolution. All in favor? That is Nicole, Sean, Rob, Moira, Chris, and Brad. Those opposed? Those abstaining? Would be Ann and Eldred. So motion does carry. Are we good with any additions? Any other discussion items? Any way we can keep students here longer? I mean, it's not even 9 o'clock yet.
Yeah, I told them we'd be done at 8:30. My apologies.
Right, give me a break, you know. Anything else, Dr. Brown?
Oh, yeah, UVA is no longer.
All right, if we do have to get this, I really don't understand how you can be number one when you lose on Saturday to Virginia Tech. I'm not even looking, so.
I do want the board to know that I created a Celebrations of Learning calendar for all the schools to use, so that instead of me running to you with a list, I will share with you that calendar. You can add it to your calendar so you can know as things are coming up, when and where they're happening. So we're excited for that because we don't just do Celebrations of Learning at the end of the year anymore. We do them at the end of case studies, at the end of units. So it's very exciting that I had to do this because we had so many.
And so we're going to have access to that.
Yeah, I'm going to share it through.
Okay. Great. No, outstanding. Anything else?
I'm going to send out an email asking who wants to be on the board team for the IPEI Spelling Bee, which is coming up on March 4th.
March 4th.
Sunday, March 4th. So.
There is a board team since I'm still sponsoring. So, and if we need any ringers, let me know. We appreciate that, Moira. So lead the charge.
I have done my time.
So if no one has anything else, without objection and without concern, we are adjourned.
Next time, Eldred and I will be working with that.